A single candle flickers in the cavernous basement of the Yusupov Palace. Its pale flame dances on silver trays piled high with pastries and goblets of sweet wine. But it's the sharp, bitter smell of cyanide that hangs in the air, hidden in the cakes, dissolved in the Madeira. Across the table sits a man whose eyes seem to pierce straight through the flickering shadows. Grigory Rasputin, the so-called mad monk. His thick beard glistens with wine, his pupils wide, unblinking. He laughs, mouth stained purple, crumbs clinging to his mustache. Prince Felix Yusupov watches him with a trembling hand, clutching the revolver in his pocket. For hours now, Rasputin has eaten poison enough to kill a bull, and yet he sits there, alive, his grin growing wider with every glass. Outside, snow buries the city in silence, but inside this basement, a conspiracy festers, ready to explode, and with it, the last gasp of Imperial Russia. Before we dive deeper into this night of madness and betrayal, take a moment to join this journey with me. If you love untangling history's darkest corners and unraveling conspiracies that shape the world, hit that like button and subscribe. We're a global circle of curious minds. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now, let's lift the candle higher and peer deeper into the shadows that swallowed the Romanovs. To understand why Rasputin's murder became a grotesque legend, you must first understand the spell he cast over a doomed dynasty. Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin was born in 1869 to a peasant family in the frozen wastes of Siberia. By rights, he should have died an unknown drunkard in the snow, but somewhere along the frozen tracks between his tiny village and the glittering palaces of St. Petersburg, Rasputin transformed himself into something Russia had never seen: a wandering holy man, a faith healer, a mystic who whispered to empresses and defied doctors. At the heart of his power lay a boy, Tsarevich Alexei, the heir to the Russian throne. Alexei was a fragile child, hemophiliac, cursed to bleed endlessly from the tiniest wound. Doctors were helpless, but Rasputin would kneel at the child's bedside, murmur prayers no one else understood, and the bleeding would stop. Or so the Tsarina believed. For Alexandra Fyodorovna, the lonely, desperate empress of Russia, Rasputin was salvation made flesh. To the Russian court, he was an abomination, a filthy peasant monk with greasy hair and hypnotic eyes, groping drunkenly through the palace corridors while whispering scandalous secrets to the empress. But this was more than court gossip. This was a crack in the foundation of the empire. By the winter of 1916, Russia was dying. The Great War devoured her sons by the millions. Bread lines wrapped around frostbitten cities. The people whispered that Rasputin, the devil monk, was the true ruler behind the throne, a puppet master who steered Alexandra, who in turn steered Nicholas II, a czar seen as weak, out of touch, and blind to his people's suffering. To many, killing Rasputin meant saving Russia, but Rasputin had woven his myth so tightly around himself that his death could not be simple. It had to be a ritual, a statement, an exorcism of a demon that refused to die. Prince Felix Yusupov, heir to one of Russia's greatest fortunes, took it upon himself to rid the empire of this parasite. But Felix was no patriot soldier. He was a spoiled aristocrat with a flair for drama and a taste for the macabre. And so, on that frozen December night, Felix lured Rasputin to his palace with the promise of wine, women, and whispered secrets. What Rasputin did not know was that the pastries were laced with cyanide, enough to kill a dozen men. The conspirators, hidden upstairs, waited to hear the monk's death throes echo through the marble halls. Instead, they heard laughter, songs, Rasputin swirling his wine, praising Felix's hospitality. Hours passed. Felix, sweating through his silk shirt, descended again to the basement. Rasputin leered at him, eyes glittering with a drunken hunger. That's when Felix realized poison would not do. The monk's death had to be more personal. He pulled the revolver from his coat and, trembling, fired point blank into Rasputin's chest. The monk collapsed. His breathing stopped. Felix stumbled upstairs, heart pounding, telling the others it was done, but it wasn't. Minutes later, a scraping sound echoed from below. Rasputin, his chest a crimson ruin, dragging himself across the floor, eyes wide, teeth bared, snarling like an animal. He lunged at Felix, clawing at his coat. Felix screamed, stumbling back as the others rushed down. More shots rang out. 2, 3, 4. Rasputin fell again. Still he moved. They dragged Rasputin's twitching body up the basement stairs and into the courtyard. The snow was falling harder now, muffling the world in ghostly silence. Yusupov and his co-conspirators, a Grand Duke, an army officer, a right-wing politician, formed a grim circle around the man who wouldn't die. One of them pressed the revolver to Rasputin's forehead and fired one final shot. The monk's body convulsed, fell limp. Steam rose from the fresh blood in the icy air. Yet even then, the story goes, Rasputin's fingers kept twitching. When they finally dumped him into the Neva River, bound in chains, it was said water filled his lungs. Proof he had still been alive when the ice closed over him. Fact or legend? The truth, like Rasputin himself, is slippery, half buried in rumor and superstition. But one thing is certain, the conspirators didn't just kill a man that night. They birthed an immortal myth. How did a wandering peasant become the phantom heart of a dying empire? How did his death, botched, brutal, and theatrical, come to symbolize the unraveling of an entire dynasty? It begins with the power of stories. Rasputin understood something the Romanovs never did, that in an age of doubt and upheaval, faith is power. He cultivated his image, the wild hair, the piercing stare, the whispered prophecies of doom and salvation. He let rumors swirl about his unholy appetites, the orgies, the drunken nights, the village girls seduced in candlelit barns. Each scandal made him stronger. To the desperate empress, the more the nobles hated Rasputin, the more she needed him. To the common people, he was a symbol of everything rotten in St. Petersburg's glittering palaces. Proof that the royals were puppets of a madman. When Russia's armies bled in the trenches of the Great War, when factories fell silent and bread riots raged, the blame did not fall on the generals or the Tsar alone. It fell on Rasputin, the immortal roach in the royal ear. But here is where the myth turns inside out. Felix Yusupov and his co-conspirators wanted Rasputin's death to be more than an assassination. They wanted a miracle in reverse, to prove to the Russian people that the monk's sorcery was a lie, that bullets and poison could kill the beast where prayers could not. What they didn't count on was the opposite happening. By turning his murder into a twisted legend, they transformed Rasputin from a man into a symbol, a man who could not be killed by poison or lead, only by ice and darkness, a demon dragged back to hell by sheer force of will. When the news broke, the people did not cheer the conspirators as saviors. Many saw the aristocrats as murderers who killed a holy man, the only man, some believed, who could protect the Tsar's heir. Alexandra was inconsolable. Nicholas II, spineless but loyal, distanced himself from the plotters. Instead of stabilizing the monarchy, Rasputin's corpse became a curse. Within weeks, bread riots turned to revolution. Within a year, the Tsar abdicated. The Romanovs were prisoners in their own palaces. By the summer of 1918, the entire royal family lay dead in a cellar in Ekaterinburg, shot, bayoneted, their bodies dumped in a forest pit. It's almost poetic. A man whose life was scandal and rumor became in death the seed of an apocalypse. And even now, more than a century later, Rasputin's death grips us because it embodies that unsettling truth, that the stories we tell about power can be more dangerous than power itself. To this day, scholars argue whether the poison ever existed. Some say Yusupov's dramatic account was a fabrication, written later to justify the murder. There's no forensic proof of cyanide in Rasputin's blood. The autopsy, rushed, partial, and shadowed by the chaos of revolution, revealed only bullet wounds and drowning. So did Rasputin really survive poison and bullets by sheer force of black magic? Or did Felix Yusupov, a man who adored the theater, craft an assassination so dramatic it blurred into legend? What's undeniable is that Rasputin made himself indispensable to the Tsarina by performing small, inexplicable miracles. Some historians suggest that his healings were little more than hypnosis, calming Alexandra's hysteria, easing Alexei's stress-induced bleeding by keeping the boy quiet and still. Others say Rasputin simply told the doctors to stop giving the prince aspirin, a drug that, unknown at the time, worsened bleeding disorders. A cunning peasant with a gift for reading desperate people, or a true mystic channeling divine power? The truth doesn't matter now. What mattered then, in that basement, was that his murderers needed him to die like a monster. A single clean death would have been forgotten, but a man who wouldn't die became a warning that the old world was rotting from within. When you think of the Russian Revolution, you think of Lenin, of the storming of the Winter Palace, of red flags and armored trains, but behind it all looms the ghost of the Mad Monk, a reminder that empires often fall not through armies alone, but through the whispers of secrets, the power of superstition, and the fear that some demons can never truly be killed. And so, when the ice cracked over the Neva River and swallowed Rasputin whole, it did not end the story. It set it loose to haunt the world forever. In the decades since that frigid December night, Rasputin's shadow has only grown longer. His name lives on as a byword for manipulative evil, for a dark puppet master whispering corruption into the ears of power. Films, novels, and songs, even bawdy cabaret acts, painted him as a demonic seducer with wild eyes and unholy appetites. Yet the real Rasputin was something stranger and more human, a cunning opportunist, yes, but also a desperate believer in his own myth. He walked a razor's edge between sinner and saint, drunk and holy fool, using the scandal of his sins as proof of his mystic power. The more he was hated, the stronger he became. What's most haunting is how easily he exploited the cracks in the Romanov dynasty. He understood something Nicholas and Alexandra never could, that people crave miracles when reality becomes unbearable. To the desperate Tsarina, Rasputin's touch meant her son might live another day. To the masses starving on the streets, he was a sign that their rulers were bewitched and blind. Rasputin didn't need armies or titles. His real weapon was belief, and belief is harder to kill than any man. After the revolution swept the Romanovs into oblivion, Felix Yusupov fled to Europe. He spent the rest of his life trying to cash in on his infamous deed. He wrote memoirs, gave scandalous interviews, filed lawsuits against filmmakers who portrayed him as Rasputin's lover. He sold a version of that murderous night like a sideshow ticket, always insisting the mad monk laughed off poison and rose from the dead, just so the world would never forget Felix's role in ending him. But Felix's own life turned into a kind of tragic echo of the empire he once tried to save. He died in Paris in 1967, a faded relic of a vanished aristocracy, clinging to the myth of a murder that failed to save anything at all. Meanwhile, Rasputin's body vanished under Soviet rule. His corpse, originally buried by the Tsarina's order, was exhumed and burned by revolutionary soldiers who feared his grave might become a shrine for monarchists. They doused his remains in gasoline and set him ablaze in a snowy field. But rumors say the corpse sat up in the flames, back arched, arms raised as if mocking his executioners one last time. Science says the heat of the fire caused his tendons to contract, but myth doesn't care for science. In the new Soviet Union, a realm built on atheism and ideology, Rasputin's ghost lingered as a lesson. When faith turns toxic, it can topple empires more surely than any army. Look at the photos of him today. That wild mane of hair, the piercing stare that seems to follow you across the room. You might think he's just a relic of old Russia's madness, a carnival sideshow of history. But listen closely and you'll hear him whisper across time that power is never just politics and armies, but belief. Raw, irrational, impossible to kill once it takes root in desperate hearts. Rasputin's real immortality is the echo of that lesson. In every regime toppled by conspiracy, in every ruler undone by whispers and rumor, in every people clinging to myths when truth fails them, the mad monk lives on. So next time you hear his name, Grigory Rasputin, the man who refused to die, remember this: sometimes the deadliest poison is not in cakes or wine, but in the stories we feed each other in the dark. And some ghosts never sink beneath the ice. They drift just beneath the surface, waiting for cracks to appear. Thank you for wandering into the shadows with me tonight. If you found this story as haunting as I did, make sure to like this video and share it with someone who loves the secrets history tries to bury. And tell me, what other forgotten figures should we summon next? I'm listening. Until then, keep your candle burning. The darkness is never empty.